So what is it actually like making music with the UNO Synth Pro? Well, I can tell you that because that's exactly what I've been doing. And it went so far as to me actually producing an entire track with every sound in the track being taken from the UNO Synth Pro.
Let's go.
And what I've got over here is the desktop module. And just to be very clear about this, between the desktop module and the bigger one with the keybed and aluminum chassis, well, internally, it's the same synth. It's just that they come in two different sizes and with two different keyboard situations and housings. But internally, it's the same machine. So you're getting a full synth no matter which one of them you get. So quite recently I did publish a very nice looking graphical audiovisual video in where my track is presented. I'm very happy with the track, and I must say the UNO Synth sounds exceptionally good. It sounds really, really good. But is it fun to make music with? Is it easy to work with? We're gonna get into that, and I'm gonna break down my track at the same time, and we'll have a look at all of the parts and everything that went into actually making the track and working the UNO Synth at the same time. Before we begin, I just want to say hello and welcome to attaQ. My name is Jakob. I'm your host and you're watching a attaQ episode. And for those of you who don't know, I'm a mobile musician from Sweden who uses portable gear such as the UNO Synth, Volcas, pocket operators, OPC to make music with. And all of the sounds I end up making with these devices, they all end up in an iPad. And I primarily use apps like AUM and also Cubasis to produce, mix and master and do all of my stuff with. So that whole track that I produced with the UNO Synth, it was all produced under Cubasis. So we're gonna have a look at the synthesizer through the perspective of producing a track with it like I did here, but I want to begin by telling you about my workflow with the UNO Synth, because I've seen this same question pop up all over the web, a question regarding the menu diving with UNO Synth Pro here. So is there a lot of menu diving? Well, I would say not really, and then it depends. You see, it's got 4 knobs here in the middle of the synth. And under these knobs, you can see columns of different things. But if you look to the left here, you can see buttons. Now, these buttons work like page switchers. So if you want to work with the oscillator, you press here. If you want to work with the modulation matrix, you press here. If you want to work with the amp envelope, you press here. And whenever you're inside one of these pages, well, these 4 knobs are dedicated for working with only that thing. It doesn't really feel like a menu diving thing. It feels more like page switching, and then you just tweak away. Now, I'll admit it, maybe my view of what menu diving is kind of colored by the way that I've used a lot of other synthesizers in the past, and I have this one synth that I absolutely, I love the sound of it. It's the Novation Mini Nova, but when it comes to menu diving, it can be very brutal, and I never got that feeling with the UNO Synth Pro. Now, there is this one thing though, where you kind of have to do some menu diving. You see, UNO Synth has an effects menu, and you can have up to 4 effects on your presets. Now, one of these categories is just that, the drive. The drive sounds amazing, by the way. It sounds great, but it's just the drive. You either turn it up or you turn it down. But when it comes to the other three categories here, modulation, delay, reverb, well, you can select different types of effects within each category. And here you do have to do menu diving.
You don't seem to get it. I need you to listen, alright? Are you listening? You see, there can only be one. And I'm the one.
Okay, so let's talk connectivity. How did I record my UNO Synth into the iPad? Well, I used a sound interface. And in my case, I used a sound interface that they don't sell anymore, which is unfortunate because it's kind of perfect for mobile music production people. Basically because it has a built-in USB hub. And that is a good thing when you're using iPads and iPhones because these things only have one port to connect all your USB gear to. So you're always going to need a USB hub. Well, the Audio Hub already has that. Yeah, it's a shame they stopped selling them. So I connected the sound output of the UNO Synth Pro to the input of the Audio Hub. Okay, so that's the audio, but then I also wanted to be able to send a MIDI clock from my DAW, which is Cubasis, to the UNO Synth Pro because I knew I was gonna do some sequences with the built-in sequencer in the UNO Synth Pro. And while recording those, I wanted to make sure that the clock of UNO Synth Pro was correctly synced to the clock of Cubasis and my session over MIDI. And since the UNO Synth Pro can do USB over MIDI, that's what I used. So I took a micro USB cable, connected it to the data port of the UNO Synth Pro, and then the other end to the USB hub of the Audio Hub. And that way I could get the UNO Synth to talk to Cubasis and vice versa. So I had my audio set up and I had my MIDI set up. And then I set my session to record audio at 48 kilohertz at 24-bit. I really don't need higher quality than that. Now, I also want to add that you don't have to use what I use. If you're a beginner, you can use a lot of different sound interfaces out there. But if you're going to get something, you probably should get something with balanced inputs to be able to record a really high quality signal from your UNO Synth. Alright, so let's start looking at the track and let's start listening to some of the sounds I used here. You know, some of them were made with the sequencer inside UNO Synth Pro, others were sequenced through Cubasis and then just simply recorded. More than half of the sounds in here are legit factory presets, and I even put in the original names of the presets in the track name fields. So if we look up one of these ones and go to that preset inside the synth, you can hear that that's the exact sound I used. Now, many of these factory preset sounds that I recorded, I almost didn't do anything within them inside Cubasis here. Some of them have a little bit of EQ on them, some of them I might have saturated just a little bit, but most of them are pretty much cleanly recorded and then nothing really done to them. They just sounded great from the start. But there are some other ones where I did a lot of work with, and there are some specific sounds I want to point out because that allows me to talk about other aspects of this synth. There is this one sound inside the factory presets that just blew my mind. It's number 30 called Ellie Snare, and just listen to it. Now, there are several reasons to why I was so happy when I found this sound. Number one, I've been playing a game for quite some time now, a really buggy mess of a game-breakingly buggy game called Cyberpunk 2077. And if you disregard from all the bugs and everything destroying your ability to play the game, because I'm playing it on a very old console, so yeah, there's that. Well, disregarding the bugs, the music in this game is absolutely stellar. It's amazing. There's been so many times I've started up the game and I haven't even moved past the intro screen because of me just getting stuck listening to the title track. Well, I wanted to make cyberpunk inspired music. So that means a lot of synthwave, retrowave, 80s like synthesis when it comes to the sound, but with a dystopian flavor to it. And the Ellie snare here, it just fits that bill perfectly. The second reason to why I was so happy when finding this preset in particular was because whenever I get a new synthesizer in my hands, I always know that the most of the time I'm gonna spend with it when making music, well, it's gonna be me trying to make drum sounds, and in particular, bass drum sounds and snare drum sounds. Well, here I had a perfect snare. Now, the bass drum, on the other hand, that's a completely different story. I just want to make it very clear. I absolutely love the sound of the UNO Synth Pro. It sounds great, but it's no fun to make bass drums with. All the bass drums I made came out sounding floppy, and it has to do with the envelopes. They're not really made for bass drum synthesis, and most synthesizers, they don't have slopes that are made for that. So unless you have a control where you can actually change the shape of the slope, well, you're not gonna be able to really control the way your drum sounds, your bass drum sounds. Same goes for snare drums. Now, some of you might think that I'm being unfair towards the UNO Synth Pro here. I mean, it does make bass drums. I've demonstrated it. The sound I made with it is in my track. But let me just show you real quick the type of bass drums I like making. So here's an app called Seek Beats, and here's a bass drum I made with that one. Now, this is for iOS, and on iOS, this is the best sounding drum synthesizer on the iOS market, bar none. I know a lot of people would disagree with me, but yeah, it makes the exact type of bass drums that I like making. Now, if you're on desktop, using PC or Mac, then you might want to have a look at Microtonic, which also makes a very, very feral sounding bass drum. And if you like that, then you might like the PO32 Tonic because it basically uses that same sound engine. Yeah, I know, I'm still being unfair because these are drum synthesizers. They're made for making drum sounds, and they're not very good at anything else. But UNOSynth is.
Are you ready for it? I'm the one. Are you ready for it?
it's very good at everything else. Pads and leads and other kind of weird effects. And when we're talking weird effects, there's this one effect in here, sounds kind of like scratching. Okay, so this is actually a factory preset. It's called FM Lead. And the way I'm making it sound like this is basically just by tweaking the cutoff filter and playing notes at the same time as I'm doing the tweaks. And when it comes to bass, I mean, the UNO Synth really does that well. It has such a depth to it, like such a bottom to it in the bass range, and it also has this ability to sound kind of like a rubber duck or TB3-ish, like also because of the drive and the filters and how they're set up. Well, while we're on the topic of bass, you see I have several basses in here, actually 3 different type of bass sounds. Now these are all sounds I made myself from scratch. So there's one of them I'm calling Cyber Psycho, and I'll show you this one a little bit later. But first I want to talk about the Zyx implant one. And if you listen to this sound, I mean, this sound is one of the most prominent sounds in the track. It keeps coming back and it's playing different bass lines basically. Well, you can hear that it's doing 2 things. It's got a phaser on there and it's also doing pitching. And it was really simple to record. The way that I did it was I first recorded the MIDI notes for this inside Cubase's, and then I played it back, and while playing it back, I was recording the audio. And when I was doing that, I was using the pitch control here on the UNO Synth to bend the notes up and down. Now, I also mentioned a phaser. Now, that phaser effect is from the built-in phaser inside the UNO Synth Pro. I thought it sounded so good, so I wanted to keep it. Usually, I don't like using phaser effects because these types of effects, well, they will mess with the amplitude, or not the amplitude, but the feeling of power or energy behind a sound as the sound is moving in and out of phase, which is what this effect does. It feels like you're losing power or power is coming back. I don't like that. I like having my basses produce power as long as they're sounding. Well, in this case, it sounded really good. And the way that I kept it in check to not overpower anything else was I saturated the sound heavily with a plugin, and I used Saturn II by FabFilter. Now, I did mention the Cyber Psycho patch here, which is a bass patch, and it's basically me using the sequencer, the built-in sequencer here on the UNO Synth Pro, and I simply programmed in an old school psychedelic trance-like bass line. Now, the reason to why it doesn't sound bass-like with a lot of bass in it is because I've processed it heavily inside Cubase's. However, if we remove all the effects and just play it from the synth itself, it sounds like this. Now, using the sequencer on the UNO Synth Pro is very straightforward. Press the sequencer button, and if you want to do step recording, you just press the recording button here, and then you simply hold down a step and input the note you want in there. Now, the sequencer is polyphonic, so you can program in more notes than just one per step. And you can also record knob tweaks and stuff like that. So yeah, you can do a lot of cool things with it. Plus, you have stuff like tie and accent. So if you want to get your rubber duck on or your TB bassline groove on, you can easily do that with the sequencer. Now remember, I said the sequencer is polyphonic, but the synthesizer is not. Yes, you can play multiple notes at the same time, but the synth is not polyphonic, it's paraphonic, meaning you can only play as many notes as you have oscillators. And the UNO Synth Pro has 3 oscillators. So if you put the synth in paraphonic voice mode and play a chord, then each note is playing 1 oscillator. I had a huge amount of fun working with this track. All in all, what I like most about the UNO Synth Pro is how aggressive it can sound. I really like the way I can also make almost any type of sound that I want out of it. I was super surprised over the snare drum sound in here, and finding that as a preset right from the start. I mean, most synthesizers, when you play through drum sounds, most of them sound kind of floppy, and it feels like someone made drum sounds just to show that, yeah, it can do that. But in the case of the UNO synth and its snare sound, the thing they put in here, it sounds like something you could actually use, which I actually ended up doing. If you want to go grab it, I do have an affiliate link down below. So if you buy a UNO synth through one of my links, then I also earn a commission for that. A commission? I also earn a percentage. It's an affiliate link. I think you know how it works. Now, before you leave, why don't you leave a like on the video, a thumbs up, because that's always awesome. And if you didn't like the video, you could always thumb it down. Now, I would love to hear what you think about the UNO synth. So leave a comment down below. And speak your heart out. Now, if you want to help in a financial way, you could buy a UNO synth through the affiliate link, or you could sign up for Patreon or do PayPal or any of the other things. You can also buy the track that you heard in this video over at Bandcamp, where I prefer people buying my music. But if you'd rather do it on iTunes, then yeah, link down below. Other ways you can help is sharing this video, and yeah, that's pretty much it. All comments and ratings are very much appreciated. As usual, I wish you a very productive week. Now go finger all of your stuff and have a lot of fun doing it.